I had this great conversation with Joe McMonagle. He's a world-class remote viewer, and he was describing to me his experiences the difference between the experiences between his first near-death experience and the second. And in the first, he was just like you described, where he said, he left his physical body and there was this tunnel and he just flew right to the white light and he just couldn't wait to get there. It was drawing him with such magnetism. Well, in his second, again, he lifts out of his body, he's presented with the tunnel and he starts to fly. And then it occurs to him, hey, I already know what's at the end of the tunnel. Why not spend a little bit of time to figure out if there's anything interesting here in this tunnel? And he used that great word. He said, so I chose to saunter to the tunnel. And I went, oh my gosh. It's a great word. But it was relevant on a couple of points. One is that he was in such control that he could choose what it is that he wanted to do. It wasn't as if his near-death experience was predetermined for him, that he had the ability to manipulate it and to speed it up, slow it down. And then there's the discovery process. So he sauntered down the tunnel and he discovered all kinds of things. Well, I'm one of those folks that says, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. We all can do it. So I tried it. And sure enough, when you go to the tunnel, you can slow down. You can walk. And all of a sudden now what becomes available to you, you start hearing this amazing music. And there's, for me anyway, there was crystals on the wall. And there's and all these colors that just emanated from the walls and from the crystals. And when you touch things, not only did they have a real tactile sense, there's this great word called synesthesia, which means that you can smell colors and you can taste sounds. And so what happened for me in the tunnel was I started to experience color in lots of different modalities, and it became now this sensory-rich environment that you could explore. And when you touch the walls of the tunnel, there's information there for you. There's information for you in the light, in the textures of the crystals. This last week, I was teaching an NDE workshop at the Monroe Institute, and there were several people who, when they were going down the tunnel, there were different parts of their lives that were there. So it was like a preview to their past life review. And so it's a rich environment that allows us to go and explore it if we slow down. And there's all kinds of really interesting information for us that's there.
And so I guess much of this then is really beyond the five physical senses. I mean, we're using words like see and touch and smell, because that's kind of what our brain understands and what our language allows. But really what you're talking about is a way of sensing and perceiving that we don't really have words for. And it's words don't really do it justice.
In the near-death literature, there's a series of common elements. And the very first common element is ineffable. It's a great word. And it just means we don't have English words to describe what it is that happens. And so people who've had near-death experiences, they try as best they can to dance around and explain things. And so when you're in the tunnel, what I've discovered through my experience and the experiences of others is that there's a ability to now open up and have a sensory rich, and so there are colors there that don't exist here on the planet. How do you perceive those? How do you perceive sounds that come to you that you can taste them. And so it starts to dissolve the boundaries about what we think is normal sensory perceptions, which in turn becomes really valuable when we start having the other experiences associated with near-death experience, those other common elements. It gives us more information, and it tells us more about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And then I was also observing that there's a lot more verbal guidance on this track than there typically is in an average Hemi-Sync exercise.
That's
Why
right.
did you think that was necessary?
When we do I've been trained in the Monroe Experience. I started in 1983, and what Bob Monroe did is he presented us with a map of the non-physical world. And, based on his experience, you go from here to here to here, and there's these places to go. And it's a template, a model of the non-physical universe. Absolutely awesome. But what we know is that the non-physical universe is also has been mapped out by people who've had near-death experiences. It's a different model. And so what we're trying to do on these exercises is to take people to different locales in the non-physical universe that have been explored by millions of people who've had near-death experience. And so we're taking people on a different path and giving them a bigger, a breadth of experience that isn't available just to the normal Hemi-Sync exercises. And so what I try to do on the first CD in this album is to take people and give them tastes of where it is that they can go and what it is that they can do in the tunnel. Mm-hmm. And so they get to learn how to maneuver and how to take these skills and apply them. But because we're limited in time on these things, you just learn to maneuver around. And then on the second CD, which is an open exercise, there's very little guidance. You take those skills, use them in the open exercise so that you can spend time. You can spend a whole day just sitting there and looking at the crystals and trying to figure out what it is that they're there for and what information they have for you and all of the sensory input that they have. And so that's what's going on. Is the first CD is a teaching CD, mm-hmm. and it allows you to move between various points. It teaches you different kinds of skills so you can maneuver in the non-physical universe easily. The second CD is really geared for, okay, now that you know the way, immerse yourself in it and do it at your own pace.
Great. Well, I thought it was very effective. I really enjoyed both tracks and thought that the guidance was extremely helpful, but there was still enough space to kind of have your own experience and to explore, especially on the second track, obviously. I mean, it's free flow. So with the 3 albums now, we've covered Meeting Your Guides, The Tunnel, Meeting Friends and Relatives, A Life Review, Cities of Light, and The Realm of Infinite Knowledge. Are these exercises similar to what one might experience if they attended one of your NDE workshops at the Institute?
Yeah, actually. We do exercises like these where we take people to very specific spots and teach them about how to be in a tunnel and how to have a life review. And of course, there's lots more that we do at a workshop. There's a whole bunch of other places that we visit, and it's nice to have a whole group of people that are with you all week. And there's that group energy. There's all the creativity that comes out of a group. They sit there and go, "Really, you did what?"
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think you could do that.
Yeah.
Well, if you can do it, I can do it. And all of a sudden it starts to feed on itself. And then there's a couple of trainers who are there saying, if you look this way, or if you broaden your, there's all kinds of nice little hints that are available at a workshop that aren't necessarily available on a CD. However, this guy is a whole lot less expensive.
Yeah.
And they're wonderful introductions. The first one was geared specifically to give people 4 very distinctly different kinds of near-death experiences, because we know that folks who have near-death experiences there's an infinite variety, and it's nice to be able to say, oh, yeah, that part where you go visit the dead relatives, I'd like to do that. Or there's the part about my life review. How does this all fit together? And what are the lessons that I've learned? And how could things have worked out if they've been a little different? So all it's available to folks who try out the CDs.
Great. And
they're unashamedly plug.
Yeah, very good. And so at TMI, we speak in what's called focus levels. And so if you're listening and are unfamiliar with focus levels, it's really a unique brainwave form that is specific to a certain state of consciousness. And so we call those focus levels. And so as we look at these various near-death type experiences, do you think they correspond to certain focus levels, or how do you think about it? This is kind of inside baseball now.
Yeah. So you described it really well. The focus levels are a waveform that supports you in a certain state of expanded awareness. And what we know about the focus levels is that they are really helpful at certain kinds of near-death experiences. So the tunnel is near a focus level, and when we teach the class, we don't talk about focus levels. We talk about vibratory windows because we use a Hemi-Sync tone, but it's a little tweaked. And for somebody who's gone through the Monroe Institute model, it's hindering to say, oh, we're going to focus 15. Because then they have in their mindset, oh, it looks like this, it feels like that. And it kind of shuts down the possibility of their experience.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We say, we're going to go to a vibratory window, which is created by Hemi-Sync, and we're going to open this thing up for you. And you get to walk through it, and the possibilities are now endless. You don't have to use a particular model. And we have Hemi-Sync there to support you. That's it. We use Hemi-Sync to support people, but it's not about Hemi-Sync. It's really about, what you can do there. And the guidance that you get allows you to get on this path so that you can experience things like the tunnel, for instance. It's one of those areas where once you know what it feels like and once you know you've been there, I mean, literally millions of people have gone through a tunnel. So the path is really well worn. All that we're trying to do is to take you there and say, here it is, here's the path, and now go explore. And off you go.
Right.
It's great.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people get too hung up on, what focus level and exercise is in, or, what frequencies am I getting, instead of remembering that your consciousness is capable of inducing these experiences on its own, and we're really just kind of giving it a little nudge to kind of go there, to reach that locale.
One of the things we know about this work is that when we're in the non-physical universe, intention is everything.
Yeah.
So when we talk about going to we're going to go to the white light, or we're going to meet our teacher protector, or we want to visit some divine being, name your location. We go into it, put the intention out there, and when we enter that expanded state of awareness, all the rules have changed. It's this quick. It's like, oh, I want to go see my guide, poof, guide right there. I want to go to the tunnel, poof, the tunnel is right there. Everything is so fast, and it's lovely because you can move and experience, and now all of a sudden, intention is important, but so is your creativity. Like, what do you want to experience? There is nothing limiting you. I mean, literally nothing limiting you. So how and what do you want to know about? What kind of experience do you want to have? That's where the fun gets to be. It's just fun.
Very good. So, Scott, you've done 3 albums now on the near-death experience. You have not written a book. Why is that?
Thank you for asking, because it's when I finished doing my doctoral work, one of the things that typically happens when you do that kind of thing is you take this academic paper and you recast it and write a book based on it. Well, one of the things that I have done over the years is to try to establish this connection with my higher self, whatever that means. And my higher self kept telling me, Scott, there's enough books out there. We really don't need another book by you about near-death experiences. That's really been covered. But what people really need is to turn their belief of a near-death experience, that this is possible, and give them the experience so they can turn that belief into a known, to understand that they really are these energetic spiritual beings that are infinitely loved and tied to the creative force of the universe. We are the stuff of God and all that can be. So it's how do you take and give people that experience? Well, it took me a while to figure it out. But now we can do that. And that's where the fun is, because now we have people who, have long said, boy, I wish I could have that near-death experience, but that whole bodily trauma thing, I really don't want to do that part.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
It's, because the typical near-death experience, the physical body is so traumatized that it dies. I mean, it's wounded in some catastrophic way. And that means that, you have to heal the body, and there's, if it's car accidents, it's other people die. And I mean, it's in and of itself, it is typically not a really positive event. So if we can skip all that and just say, can we go to that energetic level that people go to when they have near-death experiences without the trauma? Let's do it. And we've known for a long time that people have spontaneous out-of-body experiences, spontaneous near-death experiences while deeply meditating. And that was my impetus for this, because it's in the literature. It's 40 years we've known this. We haven't quite been able to figure out how to get there. And now we can. So thank you, Hemi-Sync. Thank you, Monroe. Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, we can do this thing.
Yeah. And so kind of getting into why it's so important to have these types of experiences, these near-death experiences. I mean, you touched on connecting to the creator, something greater than yourself. But then just kind of also more basically, I mean, it's just overcoming the fear of death itself, or, the experience of death. I mean, it seems to me that runs so deep. Sorry.
So what happens? Why do we watch movies where we know what the ending is? Because we know that the first time when we watch a movie, we're all caught up in the drama of what the heroine is doing, what the hero is doing, and how they maneuver through their lives. And at the end of the movie, it comes to some pleasant conclusion. What I know about this work is that we get to go to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And we get to be able to experience what it's like to make our transition out of our physical bodies back to our home. And it's amazing. It's lovely. It's joyful. It's ecstatic. It's exquisite. It's beyond all these words. And once you've had that experience and you know what the ending is, then you can come back and you can start living this life with some gusto. You don't have to be afraid of life anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen because you already know what the answer is. The answer is, I'm going to lift out of my body and I'm going to rejoin the love of the universe.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
So in this life, we now have much more freedom to actually be here and be a part of this life and not be separate from us because we know at the end we win.
Right.
So it's this odd dichotomy of I'm teaching people about death and the transition that happens so that they can live here now. And it just makes everybody's life like, oh wow.
Yeah. The implications of that. Yeah, so the implications of that are so profound, though, because I think people think of it as, okay, well, yes, of course I have a fear of death, but that's something kind of way off down the line. It doesn't impact my day-to-day too much. But, I have this, fear of, scarcity, of not having enough, or of getting sick. But right underneath that, underlying that really is a fear of death. And it informs our relationship choices, our educational choices, our career choices, so many different choices, and impacts us in ways that I think most of us don't fully appreciate. So, thank you for doing this work.
You're welcome, and it's great fun.
And so,
which is weird, isn't it? That's what people tell me that all the time. Say, isn't this a little weird to be like hanging around with this death stuff? And I said, actually, it's one of the most joyful things that I have ever done in my life.
Yeah,
is to be able to touch that space again.
Yeah, to
touch that space of joy and love, and to know that I am connected to the eternal, to God at all times. And what's really lovely about people who've used the CDs for a while, or the folks that come to my workshop, is that they get to understand that this love is the foundational energy of the universe, and we are made up of it, that we can never be separated from it because it is us. Mm-hmm. We are made of it. So this separation happens only because we have chosen to be here in this dualistic universe, and it's part of one of the rules here. So in order for us to kind of live and understand the beauty of unity, we have to back off and give ourselves the illusion of duality. But it's only that. It's only an illusion. And we can tap into that unity at any time that we choose. And once we know that at the very core of our being, we get to live from that. We get to live from this place of love and concern and service. It just has all kinds of really interesting implications.
Mm-hmm. And in your previous talks, I've heard you talk about different kinds of light. I think most people think of going to the light as going to a white light, but that's not always the case, is it?
No, it's not. And you're right. The popular media has latched on to this idea that there is a white light at the end of the tunnel, and which is true. There is. It's a golden white light, and it's piercingly bright, and it's the kind of light that just infuses us with the love of the universe. It's the kind of light that when you step into it, and if you were to look around, what you would notice is that there's no shadow. It's the kind of light that you merge with. So you become one with this beautiful, amazing, loving light. But there's two other kinds of light. There's black light, and there is clear light. Black light is extraordinary. Everybody that I've talked to that's had a black light experience, I mean everybody, when they start talking about it, they cross their arms. Let's see if I can get in the TV screen here. They cross their arms and they do something like this. They talked about being held and loved and embraced. They feel embraced by the black light. And that sense of nurture is the signature aspect of it.
Yeah.
Embraced, nurture, and so they're loved, held, nurtured. And then this is also the place. There's a special part of the black light that you can walk to that is the source. Remember back in the Bible when God did his first miracle and he said, "Let there be light." Well, what was before the light was the source. And we can take people to there. That's the black light, is the source of everything. It's the unmanifested potential of the universe. It's where everything exists before form. It exists as this energy, this loving, nurturing energy. Many of the people who have a chance to experience this, either through a near-death experience or through the workshop or through the CDs, describe this as the womb of God.
Oh, that's a great word.
So it's that, isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
It just talks about how you can take these non-specific energetic forms and create. It's the place of manifestation, of the universe's manifestation. So that's black light. Clear light is its own really special thing. We call it, its nickname is the clear light of love. And the signature aspect of this one is that there is this, the energy, this loving energy emanates, it radiates from everything. So in the exercises that we do, we talk about being able to enter into a space and notice it's really evident in the tunnel where there is this, it just comes out of everything. And when you get into an expanded state and you open your physical eyes and look around, you can see the energy, this loving energy of the universe, the very fabric of which things are made of, coming out of things. And it's the first time that people do it and they open their eyes and they see the air and they understand that the air is alive with this loving energy. It's like little bubbles that kind of pop all over the place. So that's a clear light experience. And when I had my shared near-death experience, that's the one that's the version I had. Was a clear light experience where you're kind of folded into this energetic space that was just radiating love. So it's it's just wonderful.
Beautiful. And so I asked Bill Buhlman about this as well, and so I feel compelled to ask you. But it seems like
I have to compete with Bill. Thank
you.
It's
not a competition, Scott. But
okay, good.
Lots of these phenomena seem to be going mainstream. You know, they're making their way into pop culture. So, for instance, there's this new show on I think it's Netflix that's called The OA, and it's literally about near-death experience.
I love The OA.
Yoga, you watch The OA.
Yep.
So,
I have.
What do you think about all this kind of going mainstream? Are we kind of hitting an inflection point here in sort of the awareness of sort of the general population?
We've hit it.
Yeah.
Back when I was growing up and as a young man, the image of death in the popular culture was the Grim Reaper.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe have seen pictures of it. So, it's a guy in a robe, and you can't see his face, and he's kind of skeleton-like, and there's a great big sigh that comes over his head. And, the idea was that the Grim Reaper would come and harvest souls, almost. It was a very dark view of what happened when you died and who was helping you do the dying.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the Grim Reaper in 15 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what it's been replaced by? It's been replaced by the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
When anybody talks about leaving their physical body or what happens after death, it's just like, oh, well, go to the light. It's like this thrown off comment. Even Harry Potter in this last film went to and had a near-death experience.
Yeah.
Went to the light up in the train station there and found out some answers from, Dumbledore, this guy who died before him, and he came back. So it's very much in our popular culture, and it has made a dramatic shift in how we view death, because it's now not grim, but it's hopeful, it's loving, it's a place to go to that is accepting and forgiving, and all these wonderful attributes that are associated with making our transition. So it makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I think it makes people who are interested in this topic not be afraid of it anymore.
Right.
I mean, really, if somebody picks up a CD and they see death on the cover, it's like, whoa.
Right.
Mm-mm. They're more interested in, oh, I've heard about near-death experiences. I've read about them. Wow, I wonder if I could have something like that. Well, through the use of technology and proper guidance, we can take you to the same spots that near-death experiencers go to. We can take you to the tunnel. We can take you to the area where there's a reunion. We can take you to the white light, black light, clear light. We can go and have a past life review. We can go and visit the cities of light. There are so many places to visit, and it's fun. It's a hoot and a half, and it's nurturing in the sense that we don't feel alone anymore, because we understand that we are infinitely loved always, always. And so you don't have to think about being separate, because we are always tied to the loving energy of the universe. And it just makes such a difference in how we live our lives that just by that, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And so you're also pretty heavily involved in research on the near-death experience, right? And I know that you devour every new report that comes out. Are there any interesting factoids on NDEs that people might like to hear about?
Let's see. Let me think. Sure, there's a couple of interesting things. When we do this work, what we found is that it's not about learning about how to go to the tunnel or learning about how to go to the Healing and Regeneration Center. It's about remembering. Because we have done this, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of times. There are millions of people who've had, have made the transition. And so when we move out of duality and we leave our physical bodies and move from the world of duality up into the world of the non-physical, we go, oh, yeah, I've done this before. I get this. So there's a different mindset that goes on. Mm-hmm. It's one of those little factoid things that you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's like another one is this area that we visit, the non-physical universe, is it's outside of time. And so what happens is that now all of a sudden we have to break down the barriers about what we think is possible. So, am I living another life concurrently? Sure. Am I living a life as a Roman? If so, can I talk to and influence my life as a Roman? Can that Roman influence me and all my other lives? Well, now all of a sudden the possibilities just start. When you say you don't have time, you can move anywhere in time this fast. Mm-hmm. So what does that make possible? That's when my head starts to hurt, because it's just so. Oh, well, yeah. Could I have another life back in the 1950s that could tell me about what's going on? Can I sit there and help that person in the 50s? One of the exercises that we do is called Council of Self. And this is where, so picture a campfire, and around the campfire there's a bunch of logs. This is what happened to me the first time I went to the Council of Self. And I was a Boy Scout, so, that was a familiar setting. And when I first encountered this council, I sat down on the log, and when I looked around the circle, there was me. There was Scott Taylor at 5, and at 8, and at 17, and 23, 35. So there was all of the me's that were there, that, including some that are a lot older than me, thank you very much. But there's wisdom that we might have forgotten because of this life that we have chosen. Case in point, I had a gentleman who had chosen the life of a soldier and of a policeman. He was a member of the SWAT team. He had chosen a very hard life. And when he sat down with his Council of Self, his 8-year-old stood up and said, "Do you remember when we were 7, that we used to go out to the sand dunes and fly kites? And we used to do that all Saturday morning because the breeze would come off the ocean and hit the sand dunes, and it was this tremendous lift. Do you remember what that felt like? I'd like us to feel that again." Huh. It was like, and he said his heart just melted. Yeah. Because he had forgotten that wonder, that sense of freedom, that being one with the wind and the sand, and he had totally left that out of his life. And so his younger self said, "I want that back." And so he does. Hmm. So now when he travels, he has one of those little, kites with a tail, and packs up nice and light. And wherever he can, he goes and flies to remember the joy of just being in the natural world. So this idea that time doesn't exist allows us to do all kinds of things. Another factoid is that we can have multiple points of consciousness. So there's one of the things that I teach in the CDs and in my workshop is bilocation. So that you can be, say you're lying down in your bed, and you can be in your bed, fully conscious of being and aware that you're in a bed, you have sheets and a pillow and all of that. And you can be having an experience out here someplace. And you have two consciousnesses that allow this to happen. You can split them. And then you can observe yourself doing the thing, and so you can have 3. The most that I've heard of, that people doing these exercises and be able to sustain is 6. And I'm not sure that's the limit. Because I know that, I was able to do that around the Council of Self. where I had each of these and was able to communicate with me at various ages. So that's another a little thing that says not only can we be in the experience, but we can observe the experience. Well, it's actually what happens in a life review. When we take people to a life review, oops, just a second. Mm-hmm. My cord got stuck. We take people to a life review. Life reviews happen where you get to experience it yourself, and then you get to experience it as the other. So if there's a scene in my life that I wanted to look at, so I'm me standing in the checkout line, and I'm interacting with this, 16-year-old teenage girl who is, checking me out. So it's me. I get to experience it with all of the sensory input that you would normally have. And I get to be that person. So I get to be 16 on my first day at work, operating a cash register I really don't understand yet. So I get to be her and understand, her fear and trepidation. And then at the same time, there's the omniscient point of view that says this interaction will play out among your life and among your universe and among your community this way. So when we're done checking out at the supermarket, she's going to go home and remember that exchange, and her life will be changed as a result of it. And we get to see what happens to her, what happens to me, and what happens from an omniscient point of view. So bilocating and trilocating is something that is normal in the non-physical universe, and it takes a little bit of getting used to and saying, oh, yes, A, it's possible, B, I can do it, and then C, how do I do it so I gain some more insight? Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating stuff, Scott.
And there's more, but those are the little tidbits, because what we're doing is we're learning about how duality works as we learn about how the world of unity works. And it's probably the last factoid here that I'd like to share is that we get to choose. Right. In every moment we get to choose. Do we want to live in duality? Do we want to live from unity, or both?
Right.
We get to do that. We get to choose. I can be here, and I can be hooked to the love of the universe, and I can operate from either place or both.
The fact that we chose this and continue to make choices in our life, I think, is really powerful in reframing everything, really. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for recording Into the Light, Exploring the Tunnel. And I understand we have more to come, right? Kind of getting back to the different types of light. So the next one,
we're going to have 2 more CDs coming out. The first one is an exploration of what it's like to be in that embracing source of the black light. And the other is the radiance of love that comes out of clear light. So I have to say, I think they're, all right, modesty aside, these are awesome. I'm really proud of how they turned out. So yeah.
Good. I look forward to taking credit for it as well, even though I've had nothing to do with it. But thanks again. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.